Anna Mitchell here now, and Kirsten Evans joins us. She's the executive director of In Defense of Christians. Kirsten, good morning.
Good morning.
So IDC hosted an event in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday with members of Congress and other experts on Christian persecution. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, Annie. Thank you very much for having us on. We're thrilled to be here. We hosted an event in Congress yesterday morning, which was really a response to a couple of things. One is this rising tide of legislation that we see coming in through various initiatives in the United States Congress to give a more concrete response to the situation of Christian minorities in Iraq and Syria, as well as what has been a rumored and a confirmed rumor that the administration and the State Department, the presidential administration and the State Department, will also be coming out sometime in the short term with a designation with regard to how they assess the situation of religious minorities under ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And that's important because that type of an assessment is given high priority when beginning to craft how the United States of America will respond in order to protect these communities. And, of course, with the leadership of the United States, it'll have a very strong influence on how the international community responds to protect these religious minorities that are suffering under ISIS.
Kirsten, we hear, at least in Catholic media, primarily, sometimes in secular media, about the Christian persecution that is going on in the Middle East, and we're not afraid to call it as such. But what is the importance of using the word genocide to describe what's going on there?
Well, the importance of using the word genocide, first and foremost, right, it's important because if that's actually what's happening, we owe it to the victims of that kind of a persecution to have that recognized, both in the international community today, for the sake of their communities abroad, even just for the sake of historical record. As you probably know, genocide is one of a laundry list of what the United Nations has called, quote-unquote, crimes against humanity. And they're all considered, just the most egregious of atrocities that can be committed against particular communities, oftentimes for ethnic or religious reasons, in a time of conflict or in a war zone. None of the crimes against humanity are something that anyone should be proud of having inflicted on anyone else. Most certainly, and they're all very serious, and the international community takes them all very seriously. But among them is genocide, and genocide is perhaps in some ways the worst, because it is the specific intent to entirely annihilate an ethnic community or a religious community, either in part or in whole, but within a region that someone has control over, in order to purge and cleanse that land of the presence of this community in its entirety. And that sort of intent to sort of almost historically exterminate an ethnic or religious community is by far one of the most serious crimes in the international community and in international law.
Is there any indication that Congress or the Obama administration would be leading down this path to ultimately describing what's happening to Christians as genocide?
Yes. So in Congress in September, the two co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus for Religious Minorities in the Middle East, Anna Shoes, a Democrat from California who herself is of Armenian and Assyrian descent, so she is of Middle Eastern Christian descent, and then Jeff Fortenberry, who is a Republican from Nebraska, together co-chair the Caucus for Religious Minorities in the Middle East, and they put forward a resolution on the floor of the House called what has come to be known as the Genocide Resolution. It's Resolution 75, and it calls the American government to the task, and it calls the presidential administration, because this designation ultimately needs to come from the presidential administration. It calls for a official United States recognition of the treatment of religious minorities under ISIS as genocide. as genocide and crimes against humanity, but specifically using the word genocide. There's right now over 160 members of Congress that have signed on to that resolution. It has not gone up for a vote yet, but we're hoping that it will very soon. And with all indications, it's hard to imagine, with that much support in Congress already, that it wouldn't pass. So that initiative has been very well on its way. We do understand that the Obama administration and the State Department are studying the issue, and that there is a statement which is imminent. There have been different rumors. There have been rumors that there's a possibility that they will come out with a statement that recognizes the Yazidi community as having experienced genocide, and while recognizing that many of these other religious minority communities, including Christians, have been the victims of crimes against humanity in the region, the designation would fall short of the term genocide for these other communities. In saying that, I do want to clarify a couple of things. There is no doubt that the Yazidi community has experienced a full intent of genocide in the region under ISIS, and it's right and just and a long time coming that the presidential administration or the State Department should make such a designation, and we're entirely in support of that. And I think that is a good first step to begin really calling the international community to task for protecting and preserving the Yazidi community, which we've already begun to see when the United States helped to take over Mount Sinjar a few weeks ago, which is, of course, the ancestral homeland of the Yazidis, and we won that territory back from ISIS. So that's a fantastic win for the victims that are suffering in that region. The other religious communities, including Christians, again, there's a rumor that the presidential administration might fall short of naming that a genocide. They would name it crimes against humanity, which is, of course, that's no bronze medal. It's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious designation. And under international law, it also implores a responsibility to protect by the international community. But we feel very strongly, and we're not the only ones, it's largely the consensus that these communities, alongside the Yazidi community, have also been victims of the particular crime of genocide, which is, again, the intent to eradicate in part or in full a particular ethnic or religious community from the region. And by all standards, it's not hard to make the argument that it has been the intention of ISIS to eradicate Christianity from the portions of Iraq and Syria that they occupy. And so it would be important for us that, yes, that first and foremost that the Yazidi community receive that designation, but it would be important for us, too, that these other religious communities aren't sort of left out of that designation as well, because that word genocide carries with it probably the highest level of moral obligation for the international community to respond, to come to the protection of those minority communities who are most vulnerable.
Absolutely. And the Armenian genocide happened in 1915. I believe the United States is still yet to recognize it as such. Let's hope it doesn't take that long to recognize this as genocide, that we can do something about it before all Christians are wiped out of the Middle East by ISIS. So call your congressman, listener, and encourage them to support House Resolution 75. We've been talking to Kirsten Evans. She's the Executive Director of In Defense of Christians. Kirsten, thanks so much for joining us for the update.
Thank you very much.